Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining the session on the application of artificial intelligence to the patient recruitment function for clinical trials. I am Ram Yeliswarapu, Senior Vice President at Indegene, and I lead the enterprise clinical R&D services. Let me introduce our panelists very quickly. Angela Radcliffe, he is an applied AI strategist with over 20 years of experience across life sciences, from drug discovery to patient engagement. As a former head of enterprise data governance and enterprise digital innovation at Bristol Myers Squibb, Angela brings a unique perspective that challenges the industry's oversimplified approach to patient recruitment. Craig Lipset is a leading global expert and a thought leader in clinical trial innovation, widely credited for pioneering patient centricity and the adoption of decentralized clinical trials. He's a member of the board and co-chair of the Decentralized Trials and Research Alliance. And he previously served as head of clinical innovation at Pfizer and now advises companies across the industry on digital transformation strategies. All right, with that, let's get started. Let me start by challenging a fundamental assumption, Angela, Craig, in our industry. Is patient recruitment a tactical supply chain problem? As in, you find patients, you screen them, and you move them to sites quickly? Or is it a strategic opportunity that we as an industry are somehow not able to solve for effectively enough? How do we use powerful AI tools to not just find patients, but to truly serve them? And so, Angela, may I please request you to level set the use of applied AI versus automation? And I've used the word applied AI and see how to measure the success of using AI for patient recruitment, Angela. Over to you.
Yeah, so I'm really glad that we're starting with a level set because these terms are thrown around a lot, AI versus automation. And in our industry, particularly in the area of patient recruitment and engagement, we actually often think of automation as AI, but that's not really true. So automation, it's a good way to think about it is it's like your nervous system. It's like your spinal reflexes. So when you touch something hot and you instantly pull your hand away, your pre-programmed responses that always do the same thing. So, reaching out to a patient, they fill out a pre-screener. We've automated that somehow. Someone's called them. We're calling that AI now. And while it may be reducing burden on the site to have AI help to intervene and have a conversation with a patient, it's not the same as the intelligence or the brain. And that's what AI brings to the table. So if you think about AI, it's really, it's the opposite. It's like recognizing a friend's face and understanding their speech. It learns our patterns and our decision making based on complex inputs, and patients are complex. And so we really need to use AI, the brain, and partner it with that automation, the nervous system, in order to start to bring different outcomes. And I think that's what we're going to talk about here today.
Thank you, Angela. That's really helpful. And continuing on with you, what AI use cases in patient recruitment you believe, Angela, has or have delivered value over the last 12 to 18 months? And what is really overhyped? What do you think?
It's a great question. So I think there are a couple of areas that I'm seeing real value. First is in AI-powered patient engagement. So just to back up a little bit, I think that we need to challenge sort of the fundamental assumption that we've been doing all the right things in patient recruitment. We haven't. This is a highly nuanced, complex problem that isn't a supply chain issue, to your point. Every day, millions of eligible patients just kind of walk right by our clinical trials, and we keep thinking, well, if we could just find a better way to find these patients, if we could just dig into our claims data a little bit more, we would find the patients that we need. But really, what we're talking about here is how do we activate patients? How do we help them understand that clinical research could be a care option for them? And that starts with understanding them in a new way and giving them the literacy they need to make a decision. So we can start to use AI, and we have started to use AI for education and decision support tools, systems that help them understand where they are in their health journey, really personalize the information to them. But equally important and very often overlooked is the ability to redesign trials from the ground up. So right now, using AI to identify patients is just a tiny tip of the iceberg. We need to use AI to identify the blind spots that we develop when we're too close to our protocols. We can now analyze the relationship between data collection and patient burden in ways that humans could miss previously, and to suggest protocol modifications and maintain scientific rigor all at the same time. So as far as what I think is overhyped, AI-powered patient finding, I could say that 100 times on this call today, but I'm sure Craig has something interesting to add here.
Thank you. And over to you, Craig, if you could share your thoughts, please.
Wow, that's such a great introduction here, Ram. I'm so glad to have Angela here. Um, when I think about these use cases around AI and patient recruitment and which are deriving value, like so many, my mind gravitates to this visual of the recruitment funnel, and I start to think about, well, will it be those use cases where AI is helping upstream of the funnel, like Andrew was mentioning, that we can design better and design for smarter studies? Will it be those use cases that help more patients to enter the funnel? Patient identification with EHRs or bots and other agents that can help inform patients about research and hopefully add to the top of the funnel? Will it be those use cases that help the patients move through the funnel, whether it's AI for, say, chart review for screening and eligibility and help to actually move patients along? Will it be those use cases that help at the bottom of the funnel, personalizing content and information and helping patients with more real-time answers to their questions and concerns? And look, clearly there's a lot of dysfunction across many stages of that funnel. I tend to be a believer that our problem, like Andrew was describing, is not the top of the funnel, and we shouldn't just focus on throwing more patients into a broken and dysfunctional system. We should be optimizing the funnel so that those patients we engage, we're doing right by and helping to make sure that we're presenting the right opportunities and the right information for them to be able to digest. When I think about where there's the most value, as an industry, we tend to do the best in deriving value when something is discrete and kind of self-contained. And we tend to fall down when things require a lot of different stakeholders and a lot of different buy-in. So I would say that areas like study design and planning are ones that sponsors can control. There's fewer stakeholders involved than when we try to get involved in the morass of, say, that in the challenges of trying to improve matching at local sites. One other area that I think when we think about overhype is that notion. I agree with Ange that the pain point is trying to find more patients, and I tend to be an enthusiast of the role of the healthcare provider and how can we start to engage patients and their trusted physicians with whom they're already being increasingly empowered to make shared decisions about their care and about their treatment. And so I think when we're just pushing information to patients and almost telling them to abandon the doctor that they've already chosen who's managing their care, we're doing them a disservice. This is a dish that's best served paired, and the ideal pairing for us is when the patient is making important decisions with their physician.
Craig, thank you so much for that. For a moment, right, and Angela, Craig, both of you alluded to trying to move up the value chain using artificial intelligence to do better study designs and create, hopefully on the back of the ICH M11 machine-readable protocol, the biomedical concepts now get defined uniformly across the industry for everybody to interpret and use the same way. But having said that, what role do you think would real-world evidence play into it? For example, we talked about electronic health records, obviously with rich information. Claims data, on the other hand, perhaps is broad, not deep. Patient registries are deep, not broad. And then you look at, for example, patient-generated data coming from social media. How do you kind of bring in all of this together, and can we leverage AI to at least qualify the top of the funnel as well? I know you both emphasized that patient advocacy, health literacy, and use of AI in doing those things, but with all of the data around us, do you think we can do a better job to make sure quality data or the funnel itself gets created with quality patients going in at the top? Angela, over to you.
You're speaking my language here, Ram. I absolutely think that's where we can do a better job. The problem has never been identifying patients, it has always been activating patients. And to activate someone, you really have to understand where they're coming from and meet them where they are. But behavioral economics is complex. And to really understand what a patient needs, you have to understand a myriad of different things. And so instead of just looking at medical eligibility, which is what we tend to do. Does this patient fit these inclusion criteria, these exclusion criteria? We really need to start thinking about whether or not this patient is ready to be activated. And that means looking at some of this real world data in a completely different way. So social determinant of health data, critical. I grew up very, very poor without plumbing as a child, and that has directly affected my health outcomes. And without considering that part of my story, you may not be able to activate me for a clinical trial because maybe where I come from, my origins, my social determinants may have shaped how I interact with the healthcare system. And so by using real world data and picking different pieces of that information early on and trying to create a more complete picture of what patients need, we might have a better way of really trying to figure out how eligible are they to participate in other ways. And it's not because they're not eligible. It's because they're not ready to make our studies part of their treatment journey. And there are ways that we can change that. By understanding some of these real world data elements, we can understand whether a patient needs time to move from not health literate to more health literate to make the decision, or whether they need social support in order to participate in this trial, or whether they need family or community blessing to participate in this clinical trial. So I think it's a really rich area where AI can help us unpack and almost automate the way that we go about approaching patients in a very different way.
Thank you, Angela.
You know
Craig,
what
any
I love
thoughts?
about having these conversations, Ron, with in places like Indegene is that your focus as a company is not just on clinical, but it's also a commercial and medical. And when we think about how companies have been thinking about personalization and messaging in commercial, it is such light years ahead of where we are in clinical. People realize that when it comes to medication adherence, for example, not everybody just needs a text message, right? There's different nudges and tools and resources that I need at different places in my journey. And certainly that same, as Ange points out, is so true as we think about the individual's journey around care and towards a clinical trial. And the idea that we just push the same messages to everybody, assuming that they're all at that same space, I think is really enlightened and a really exciting use case for the convergence of this diverse data. When I think about this connection with EHRs and claims and behavioral data and other social data, I continue to believe that the best centers of connectivity is me, the patient themselves, that patients are empowered when they have access to their diverse data. And so we really need to continue to champion and make sure that patients have access to that rich data so that then we can help them by layering on those types of insightful, personalized tools that Angela is mentioning. I can't help but think, and as we think about conversations like this, that for the most part, when sites and sponsors, when we're just focused on them with tools, it's to create a pull into a specific study. But when we can empower patients with these tools to help them to navigate their journey, very often it's creating a match for the right study for that patient. It's directionally different, and only one is truly patient-centric.
Absolutely, Craig. Let me ask you a question, Craig, on that point. Obviously, we need to get IRB approvals for patient-facing content in the context of clinical trials. Trying to address their fears and motivations for them to consider this is so important, and the IRB obviously has to review every bit of the patient-facing content. How do you think we get constrained in trying to explain the protocol in the simplistic language while ensuring that the guardrails that the IRB sets are being adhered to as well? As much as we focus on health literacy, advocacy, explaining the protocol in simplistic terms to patients and their families, we also need to be guided by what we can put in the patient-facing material. How do you navigate that part of it?
Last year, I had the opportunity to spend a day at the Department of Health and Human Services, speaking with the groups that have oversight related to our nation's, at least for those in the U.S., IRB infrastructure, and really focusing on their state of readiness or perceived lack thereof. And I think we have to really be advocates and champions to help IRBs around modernization and the appropriate use of AI on their side. When they're beholden to only reviewing static documents, we're kind of trapped in this cycle. When we can help IRBs to modernize their tools and processes for the age of AI, how does that set us up as research sites, as research sponsors, to begin to embrace more modernized approaches for delivering personalized and tailored information to the individual? Short of that, we do end up in a bit of a cycle of trying to limit ourselves to very static, very limited documents. And look, even there, we can still act. Even there, we can still get, different permutations of content approved and just use the right tools to pair the right resource to the right patient at the right time. So there can still be a level of personalization in terms of what we represent. But I'm really excited about our those that are really working to help IRBs around modernizing their tech stack so that they can be more AI first, AI ready, and ready to partner with sponsors and sites that want to leverage these new and emerging opportunities.
Thanks, Greg. That's really helpful to know essentially about the change of the mindset use of tech by the IRBs to go hand in glove with what we're talking about here. Angela, back to you. Switching from the patient to the sites for a moment, how do you think artificial intelligence could help ease the burden and perhaps bring in efficiencies to the workflow at the sites? Many times we talk about reducing the burden on sites, and the sites are obviously swamped with their day-to-day activities of taking care of patients. And then if you don't qualify and send the right patients out there and help streamline some of their workflows, that could become a nightmare. What do you think we could do with AI to help ease that burden at the site level, Angela?
There are so many opportunities at the site level and I think we're just starting to scratch the surface there. As a matter of fact, over the weekend, I was working on the big challenge of how do we make training less burdensome for sites. And we know there are initiatives like the Transcelerate initiative trying to address this and make it easier for some of these core things to happen and sort of flow across all sponsors. But still, in workflow, training isn't really the way we handle training. So that's one area of opportunity. But the other really truly is in this idea of workflow optimization across multiple studies and multiple patients. So we know sites are juggling dozens of protocols, each with different visit schedules and requirements. And AI could really quickly identify opportunities to batch tasks. That's one of the quickest ways that AI could support a site. So let's schedule all EKGs for Tuesday mornings and group lab draws. And it sounds basic, but really this kind of intelligent optimization of workflow may make it much more possible for sites to be able to conduct a trial in a way that doesn't mean that while I'm sitting in my study visit, the study coordinator gets called away because she's got to run down the hall because the medicine that she was waiting to come to the correct temperature before injection is ready. And now she has to do that in the moment, leaving me in a room down the hall waiting for the PI to come in or for her to come back. There are ways that we can use AI to really help support our sites in that way and give them the capacity to conduct more trials in a more efficient manner and take some of that burden that we've placed on sites off of them. I think they're generally overwhelmed, under-resourced, and they need solutions that really integrate seamlessly, not another system to learn. And for the first time, AI is not a point system, at least not if we're using it correctly. It can replace so much of the technical burden we've placed on sites to date. And I'm really looking forward to seeing how innovators come up with ways to use AI to support our sites differently.
Ooh, I love that, Ange. It has me thinking about how so many solution providers are thinking about these discrete tactics. I want to develop an AI tool for X or for Y, and so many of them are going to require a site to have to, pause and train and learn something new, and very few have the time or capacity for that. And so it is really exciting to think about in what way AI actually can support more efficient introduction of these tools into the site. How can AI actually be a source of relief for sites when it comes to being able to implement and introduce these new opportunities in their frantic and busy ecosystem?
Thank you, Craig. And staying on with you, Craig, for a moment, just thinking about fairness and bias, and for example, using AI, we talk about diversity, equity, inclusion. We talk about social determinants of health. We talk about patient stratification. How do we ensure that AI stays within the confines of ensuring fairness and bias? How will that be viewed by regulators, Craig? Any thoughts?
Years ago, Ram, I remember being in a conference room with the leaders of a number of different patient organizations, and we were very proudly presenting and sharing and updating them on some work that we had been doing within a pharma company to better reuse historical control arm data. We were really excited about our reuse of data in that it provided perhaps a pathway for smarter and more rational control arms in trials. No patient really wants to be in a control arm if they're signing up for a trial. In most cases, they want the investigational medicine, the new treatment option. And we were really proud to share that work. And I distinctly remember a number of the patient leaders in that room kind of cringing a little, which surprised me. And when we dug into why, these were leaders who were primarily concerned with their communities that had been historically underrepresented in studies, and now that underrepresentation further being exacerbated and repeated. Their fear was that if we were reusing historical control arm data for new studies, we were simply taking data sets in which they weren't being counted, whether because they were a woman, people of color, or whatever that demographic was that we neglected to enroll in a more meaningful way. Now, there are clearly things that we could do as a result of that insight to make the use of that data better and more appropriate. But the big takeaway for me here wasn't, wow, we could really change the reality here of how we're implementing to be more fair. It's that perspective that perception drives trust. And when people perceive that we're using data in ways that might be marginalizing or unfair to them, we lose that trust. And trust is so fragile for us in clinical research today more than ever. And so while there are always going to be strategies and opportunities for us to try to improve how we're using data and to be more fair and responsible, I think it's equally important for us to make sure we're doing our part to raise the curtain and to show how that is being manifested, how we realized that potential for an unfair use of data, biased use of data, and the corrective measures we've taken, because that is how we earn and maintain trust.
Thank you. Angela, your response?
I love everything Craig said, and I really especially love sort of the concept, Craig, that you raised around what we often assume patients want isn't always what they want or what they need, or where they're coming from. And my perspective is that the biggest bias in recruitment isn't our algorithms. It's our fundamental approach, right? We design trials for the, X percent, 10, 12% of Americans who are health literate enough to navigate them independently. And that is not algorithmic bias, that is systemic bias that we've built in. And to use AI to create fairness means adapting our approach to different literacy levels, cultural contexts, and life circumstances. And it means building in real-time checks, not just, in the data for demographic representation, but for comprehension, true informed consent, et cetera. And I think we've always had a bit of a fear about doing that because it's going to slow things down, right? Like we tend to ground on those inclusion and exclusion criteria. And we want to trust that the data is going to be fair and equal, et cetera. But engaged, informed participants stay in trials, and that is ultimately how we're going to accelerate programs at the end of the day.
Thank you, Angela. Craig, if you were to fund, for example, one initiative using artificial intelligence that you think could help move and bend the needle towards first patient in or getting the critical mass of sites activated, the threshold value and patients in there to accelerate trials, what would that be, Craig?
Well, I'm not going to make it too easy for the audience and give them a very, very granular and specific opportunity. But what I will say is I believe the biggest untapped opportunity for us is when we can engage the healthcare provider to engage with their patients around research. Patients are not medical mysteries. They have doctors. In most cases, they have an existing therapy. The patients that we're looking for our studies tend to already have a diagnosis and a prescription, which means they have a doctor in their life. And if we're just running ads and social and other campaigns to try to pull them away from that doctor, we're doing them a disservice. I think the real untapped opportunity is this unicorn, the idea that an HCP can stimulate a referral into a trial. And we've been gifted guidance from the FDA last year that provides some breadcrumbs in this direction, that HCPs can support routine care activities in a clinical trial. And mentioned earlier, behavioral economics. This kind of addresses the misaligned financial incentives, the freakonomics that too often stand in the way of a healthcare provider having a conversation about research with their patient when they are not the investigator. Now, that's not an AI solution. To me, that's an AI wrapper. To me, we can start to look at AI opportunities and then lean them in to say, okay, what does that mean for the HCP? And how can I leverage this new AI use case that I'm pursuing in a way that not only engages the patient, but engages them with their treating physician?
Absolutely, Craig. Angela, how about you?
Yeah, I love that, Craig. And my softball answer, the giveaway is, look, somebody out there, please develop AI-powered health literacy assessments and adaptive education at scale. I would buy that. I think the world needs it. Please, someone go build that. But more fundamentally, I think we're missing a huge opportunity. If you think about the fact that AI is capable of replacing high throughput machines because it can make connections across hundreds, thousands, millions of assets, and say, oh, wait, this protein over here actually matches with this other thing over here. And now suddenly we found something that has promise in a rare disease. It can certainly become our thought partner to reimagine clinical trials from the ground up. I mean, we have to figure out how to get out of our own way. And now we have a new thought partner to do that. So we need to start deconstructing every assumption about how trials must work. Why do we need these endpoints? Why these visit schedules? Why this document burden? We could use AI to help us see past our institutional blindness and design trials that are both scientifically rigorous and human-centered. And I think that reimagining from first principles would be such an interesting conversation and maybe eliminate the conversation we're having today about patient recruitment.
Absolutely, Angela. Thank you. As we get to the close of this panel session, Angela, let me see if you have any closing remarks. You could also talk about perhaps any misconception about AI that we should leave behind today for our audience. That would be helpful as you close it out. Thank you. Angela?
Let's please stop treating AI like the next tech solution in the room. Let's start to recognize it for what it is. It's a transformational technology that is going to change every aspect of the way we work and live. And we have the responsibility to use it for good. And the more smart clinicians, smart practitioners in our space and in life science, patient advocates, look at the technology as just that, a transformational opportunity to do something incredible for patients, the more likely we are to see that good happen sooner rather than later.
Thank you, Angela. And Craig, how about yourself? Any closing remarks?
I think the misconception I'd love to just call out is the perspective I hear so often that this time it's different, that this time trial innovation will happen, change will happen, that it's inevitable and that trials will now just change for the better. We are an industry that still uses a paper-informed consent. Over half of sites indicated in surveys last year with SCRS that they will not even touch a single study that has any electronic informed consent whatsoever, despite data and evidence showing patients are better informed. So all of our sentiment around patient centricity kind of goes away when work is hard, and adoption and meaningful adoption is hard. It's work. And so the misconception I would like to park and put aside is that change here is inevitable and will just magically happen. AI is sometimes it feels like magic, but change and adoption is not. That is hard work. It requires investment. We know as an ecosystem what good change management looks like, and it is not trivial. It strikes fear in the heart of many operational leaders, but that's what's required for us to make sure that these incredible opportunities at our doorstep are not neglected and lost, but can actually be adopted in ways that drive positive impact for our entire research ecosystem, sites and patients included.
Thank you, Craig. And with that, Angela, Craig, thank you both very, very much for this wonderful discussion. I'm sure our audience will take away a lot of valuable piece of guidance and advice. And to our attendees and audience, I'll see you soon on another session. Thank you so much. Take care.